Hi, this is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. Well, I got an interesting question the other day on one of the YouTube pages. It was a comment, and somebody was asking me how all this had happened. How did I get to the point where I went from having bariatric surgery to going carnivore and, kind of the health journey? And I started thinking about it a little bit and realized something, that really, frankly, most of my life, I had no concern at all for my health and did not make any special eating plans, didn't do anything in particular to make myself healthy. And, it wasn't until really I turned 50 when I really started to worry about things. And I think that happens to a lot of us, but I would kind of like to give you kind of an overview of my life's path as far as health is concerned, to help you to think about this while there's still time, and maybe get you motivated to think about making healthcare changes. I started off, when I was a kid, there was always one kid back in the 70s that was kind of the fat kid in class, and that was me. I mean, I was always certainly pudgy for most of my time in elementary school and morbidly obese, really until I was about 15, 16 years old. And all of a sudden I growth spurted with puberty. And with that growth spurt, I hit close to a normal weight. I mean, I really filled out, and my weight was, pretty close to normal for the first time. And that kind of motivated me. I started lifting weights, started playing football, eventually went on, joined the Army, and went on, became an officer. And with that, I started getting really into running and doing athletic stuff that I'd never done before. I'd always been the chubby kid that was never particularly athletic, but then all of a sudden I, lost the weight, and that worked well, really into my 30s. And then I got out of the Army Reserve and started having kids, started eating a regular diet, wasn't exercising on a regular basis. And as a result, I started gaining weight. And when I started gaining weight as an adult, basically from my 30s on, well, the way I would kind of tackle it is I would get to the point where I'd have to go out and buy new clothes, so I would do whatever fad diet was happening, Jenny Craig or Nutrisystem or something like that. Do that for a couple months, lose 30, 40 pounds, go back to normal eating. That would stay off for a couple of years. And this kept on going for, decades, where I'd just go up and down all the time in weight. And worse than that, when I was 16 years old, I was in North Carolina, and in eastern North Carolina, and back then nearly everybody smoked. So I picked up the smoking habit when I was 16 and smoked for about 30 years. And I'm spending all this time and frankly just did not really care that much about my health, what I was doing, partially because I'd had a bad family history. My dad died of a heart attack when he was 52. My grandfather died in his 50s. As a result, I just didn't expect to live that long. I thought that was kind of a foregone conclusion. And as things happened, I probably would have not cared about my weight. I was up to like nearly 300 some odd pounds. And, but I felt okay. I had quit smoking when I was about 46 or so, which, was probably a very important thing to do. But when I turned 50, I was down at the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, and I started seeing a bunch of bright lights in my eyes. And I was afraid at first that I was having a stroke. Turns out, no, I wasn't having a stroke, but there were some eye problems. So I went to go see my eye doc, who was a friend of mine, and she kind of poked in there and she said, "Oh my gosh, the macula of the back of your eye is just an absolute mess. And you've got macular degeneration. We're going to have to start doing shots in your eyes." And I just did not want, for some reason, the thought of having a heart attack didn't bother me. Thought of having a stroke didn't bother me, but the thought of having needles in my eyes really got my attention. And that's what really was kind of my come to Jesus meeting when it came to trying to get healthy. Because I asked her, I said, is there anything I can do to keep that from happening? And her response was, you got to lose the weight. No mention of metabolic health, no mention of the fact that I was basically a type 2 diabetic. But, she said, you just got to lose the weight. That's all I needed to do. So I started doing what I used to always do. And, what do you do if you're an American and you got a weight problem? You go to Weight Watchers. They're the experts. And for the first time, I did a caloric restriction type diet, and it didn't work. It just didn't work. The scale was not budging. And so I started looking for all other alternatives. And I found a podcast that was talking about weight loss, and they mentioned something that I'd never heard before. That Weight Watchers' rate of success, according to their statistics, was about a 1% success rate. And that's, being able to take the weight off, significant amounts of weight like I had to do, and keep it off. And I was like, uh-oh, that's not good. And that could explain why it's not working for me. But then they mentioned that bariatric surgery, that the Cleveland Clinic had been doing a bunch of 5-year studies, and it showed that had close to a 70% success rate. So I started really looking into bariatric surgery, decided on having a vertical sleeve, found a place down in Mexico that I could get it done without having to just self-pay, not have to worry about dealing with the insurance game, and went down and had it done. And it was successful. I mean, I lost over 70, 80 pounds, and frankly, when you lose a lot of weight like that, it really does change things. I was able to be active again. I did my first 5K run, and not too bad of a time. Climbed a 14,000 foot mountain in Colorado. I mean, there was a lot of cool things that I was doing, and being very energetic, starting to exercise, etc. But like many people who had bariatric surgery, within a couple of years, after I started getting regular hunger signals back again, I started regaining some of the weight. And I noticed it and was like, okay, and I happened to run across a podcast or a video with Dr. Stephen Phinney. And Dr. Stephen Phinney, if you don't know him, he's the chief science officer at Virta Health now, but at the time he had his MD from Stanford. He had a PhD from MIT in exercise sports physiology. So he wasn't some idiot. But he's talking about low carb and metabolic health. And the only thing I knew about low carb was, I knew about Atkins, and I knew that he was bad because that's what the media kept saying. I didn't know anything else about it. But there's something about the fact that there's this really smart guy talking about low carb dieting that really got my attention, and it started me down a path where I started really studying it. And for about 3 or 4 months, I really got into it and decided, yes, that's what I was going to do. And I remember very distinctly throwing everything out of my cupboards, all the vegetable seed oils, all the bread, everything else, and just eating a keto diet. And it was spectacular. I mean, I lost an extra 10 pounds pretty darn quickly. Felt fantastic. Really got into the whole thing. I mean, got a little keto mojo meter thing, started checking my ketones, the whole 9 yards. Really got into this thing, got into the community. And everything's going great for a couple of years. And then I run across this Dr. Ken Berry guy, and Sean Baker, who are talking about eating nothing but meat and this carnivore thing. And I thought that sounds absolutely idiotic. But because I kind of liked them from the low carb lifestyle, I started paying attention to what they were saying, kind of studied it again for a couple more months, and along comes COVID. And with COVID, there's all these people, I didn't want to go to the grocery store all the time, because I wasn't quite sure how bad it was going to be, but I knew I wanted to get at least a month's worth of food so I didn't have to go out. So I figured I could get a month's worth of meat and eggs and not have to go to the store. So I just got a month's worth of meat and started eating it and lost an extra 10 more pounds and felt really good. And I started noticing my body really started to change. Started getting more muscular, started to get stronger, was doing more resistance training, etc., and felt spectacularly good. And included, when part of the whole COVID thing, I started looking into areas that I'd never looked at before. Like, I kept hearing about this vitamin D and why it was important. Started studying that, and that got me in a whole new area of nutrition and realizing, different blood work, etc. So, I really, COVID really helped me pay attention to my health, helped change my diet in some spectacular ways because I wanted to become more metabolically healthy in order to be on the right side of a pandemic. And that type of thing, it was interesting. The eye nearly going blind with macular degeneration, COVID, etc. Those were kind of my wake-up calls as far as trying to get healthier and trying to change things. It was never anything spectacular, like, having a heart attack or something like that. But when I turned 61, I did finally have a heart attack. And I'm trying to, figure out why that particular thing happened, particularly when I'd been getting healthy for over a decade and getting, more metabolically healthy. Why did that happen? And it dawned on me that one of the things I did back during the 90s was when I was trying to lose weight, there was a drug by the name of Fen-Phen, which was this combination of a couple of drugs. It was eventually taken off the market by the FDA because it caused heart valve problems. Well, guess what caused my heart attack? A heart valve problem. And, things that you do, 30 some odd years ago, or 20 years ago, can really make a difference to your health today. And when I kind of look at it, I can see two different trends that are kind of important. One of them is, look, heart disease doesn't happen overnight. It is something that happens over decades. You having a Twinkie tonight is not going to cause you to have a heart attack, but doing Twinkies over 30 years will. So, when I look at, the fact that I was not paying attention to my health, doing everything wrong, smoking, drinking to excess, and being overweight and yo-yo dieting certainly did nothing for my health. Matter of fact, it was actually hurting it. And I was not being metabolically healthy. I didn't even know what in the world that meant until really just 6 years ago. So, when you kind of look back on your life and you wonder, it's like, hey, I'm trying to get healthier, but I still got health problems. Look, just because you had an auto accident doesn't mean it's your fault, but there's still going to be things that are going to be your problem. You're going to have to deal with insurance. You're going to have to get healed. You're going to have to deal with a lot of stuff that are your problem because of the result of an accident that wasn't your fault. And frankly, many of us didn't know that our diet and our lifestyle and what metabolic health was until fairly recently. I've only started this channel about 1.5 years ago. And, if you've been following for a while, you may not have known about metabolic health. You may not have known about carnivore. You may have not realized that you could have bariatric surgery and still go carnivore. These are all things that you just may not have been able to figure out. But realize that our health is a long-term process. And what's really kind of cool about this is that, hey, just because I had a heart attack, that's my problem. And it probably was from the Fen-Phen. It was probably from years of being pre-type 2 diabetic or type 2 diabetic. carrying around excessive weight, smoking for too many years, etc. I did a lot of things wrong. But by making the lifestyle changes, by losing the weight, by switching to low carb and eventually carnivore, and by getting myself healthier, when the eventual heart attack happened, I was able to withstand it. And that's, is driving the heart docs kind of nuts, that I had heart surgery in November. By January, I'm back to working out and I'm doing everything. I took, December off, but when I was done, after, rehabbing, the scar is basically gone. I'm walking, today I did resistance training and walked 5 miles. I'm just as healthy as I was before I had this surgery and before I had the heart attack. And I think this is kind of important, that, bad things can happen, but when you have the resilience, because you're getting yourself healthier, you can withstand these things. So hopefully this is a message of encouragement. Take a look and see, realize that, hey, you may have made a bunch of bad decisions, bad health decisions most of your life. But if you stop it now and you start getting involved in, and really changing your metabolic health, putting in the resistance training, going low carb, getting yourself metabolically healthy, and it's going to take you maybe, if you're just starting off from ground zero, it may take you a few months. But invest in it now, because once the inevitable health consequences of bad decisions over time come due with some sort of major health catastrophe, it could be a heart attack, stroke, cancer, whatever. The healthier you are when you go into it, the better you are to withstand it. And that's the important part. You may not be able, you can't turn back the clock, but you can start a new future and make yourself healthier for the long haul. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. I hope, if for those of you who are watching this week, it is Easter time. Hopefully this will be a time of new renewal for you, and where you can take a look and realize that you want to change your health and start working on it while there's still time, so that you're able to better withstand the things that are probably inevitably going to happen to us as we age. I try to put out a couple messages each week. If you like this message, hit like and subscribe. Join this channel of other like-minded folks. I will talk to you again soon.